my previous video, I talk about how I don't like GPU boost when it comes to overclocking on my Pascal overclocking guide. And that's still true. I really don't like how GPU boost messes up your overclocks. It doesn't really make you not able to overclock, but it messes it up because it varies the clock speed. And this is the problem that I'm gonna talk about. So in this video, I'll talk about why is Nvidia actually using GPU boost, the real reason behind it. Because I don't think it's really just because of enhancing performance, because that's clearly not what it's doing, to my observation at least. It's just really annoying. So here it is. First we have to take a look at the different approaches of AMD and Nvidia on boost, because on AMD's side they have a set specification of clock speed that the chip, a certain specification that their graphics chip is supposed to hit, and when you buy their graphics card from AMD, that's what you're gonna get when you plug it in. So if you buy a 580 with a 1411 MHz clock speed specification, for example, when you plug it in your system, it's gonna run at that clock speed pretty much all the time, except if you're hitting power limit or temperature limits, but that's the same on both sides. On Nvidia's side, you get this like really vague base clock speed and boost clock speeds that you never really see in the real life, unless you're really limiting your card with temperature or power, for example. So you might get like a 1750 MHz 1080 or something like the reference one, but you might actually get like almost 1900 MHz in real life when you plug it in. And on the next card you buy, you might get over 1900 MHz, and on the third card you buy, you might get close to the lower 1800 MHz. So it's really varying on a chip per chip basis, on a per card basis that you buy, not on a per model, even though their specifications are the same. In fact, Linus even made a video of this when he tested a bunch of GTX Titans Maxwells before, on testing the differences in a per card basis on the same system, on the same version of the card, the Titan X, and he found that the performance and clock speed does vary on a card per card basis. Now the reason for this is really just silicon quality. Now silicon quality will vary on a chip per chip basis on the individual cards, because that's you can't get around that. When you make something out of silicon, you make a silicon transistor chip like a GPU or CPU or some other thing, you're bound to get some chips that are varying in quality compared to each other. Every single chip is a different quality to the other one. You won't find the exact same quality on two different chips. That's just the way it is. So all the manufacturers like AMD and Nvidia has to do something about it to make sure that they can use the maximum amount of chips as possible that they produce, even though their quality are varying, and still hit their performance and specification targets. So what AMD does, for example, is that even though they set a set clock speed, they vary the voltage to make sure that even though if they might produce a lower quality chip, they just increase the voltage to make sure the chip still hits that certain clock speed. On Nvidia's side, on the other hand, they actually have a set voltage. All the chips run at the same voltage, so if you check your Nvidia card on MSI Afterburner, it's going to show up as 1.08 volt or 1.091 volt, somewhere around that range usually, unless you're throttling really hard, and it'll go down to 1.075 or so. So yeah, they have a set range of voltage that their cards will use. All of them use the same voltage. So what they do instead, to ensure that most of their chips that are producing are still stable and still meeting their specifications, is that they just vary the clock speeds on a chip per chip basis based on their quality. And this quality is called ASIC quality. And in fact, Nvidia doesn't even show you the ASIC quality anymore on GPU-Z, because if you use GPU-Z, a monitoring tool, you can actually find the quality of your AMD graphics card, but not anymore on your Nvidia graphics card. And I'll bet you, if you can see that, the higher quality chips will boost to a higher clock speed at the same power limit and at the same voltage than the lower quality ones. And for this reason, this is why Nvidia is using the boost algorithm to vary the clock speeds on a chip per chip basis. This is basically just a different way of making sure that their yields are better, to make sure that they can salvage the most chips as possible even though their quality are varying, and yet still meet their specifications. And they also are able to still hit very high performance targets, because it means that they can have chips that are pretty good, hit a very high boost clock, but some duds can still pass off and be sold even though their clock speeds are much lower if they're really low quality. So that's a real reason I think Nvidia uses that. But I think that's a big problem, because that means you as a consumer might get a GTX 1080 but that GTX 1080 can perform a few percent off lower than your friend's GTX 1080, for example, just because of how Nvidia's doing the varying chip quality and how they're tackling the problem. But on AMD's side, it creates another problem too, because by increasing the voltage and making sure the voltage is enough for that chip, they're actually hurting themselves in efficiency, because that means that they have to use voltages that are varying. So some chips might use higher power consumption, or even like most of the chips are even using more power than they're supposed to be using, because they're trying to be safe and making sure the chips are stable to be sold. So that's why AMD is really hurting on like basically shooting themselves on their foot on efficiency because of that method. But on Nvidia's side, by setting a certain voltage, they basically can keep the efficiency and power consumption on all their models basically the same, even though the chip might be varying in quality. But what you're getting is that varying in performance. So I don't know, what's your take on it? Do you prefer varying efficiency, or do you prefer varying performance on a card per card basis? Personally, I would take AMD's approach any day, because let's face it, I honestly don't really care about efficiency. I just overclock all my cards and all my CPUs to the end, and that really shoots the efficiency way down, so I don't really give a shit. I just really want something that's stable and doesn't mess with my overclock, which is what AMD's Polaris architecture does, not Nvidia's Pascal and GPU boost, which is extremely annoying to overclock. So yeah, anyways, that's the end of this video. I hope you've learned something useful in this video. And if you do like this video, please click the like button, and please click subscribe to see more of my future videos. Thanks for watching.